We have three resources for you today for episode 1 of our new series, Little White Lies. All three of these resources are going to be available to you at the same time. You can use all of them. You can pick and choose whatever appeals to you most and how you like to learn and absorb information. So the first resource is obviously this video. So in this video, I'm going to really delve in to the scope of the problem and specifically one survey conducted by an organization called Teaching Tolerance that looks at how slavery is taught and learned in America. And it has some really telling results and conclusions from that survey. The second resource that is available to you is a quiz that is taken from the survey that Teaching Tolerance gave the 12th grade students to measure how much they knew about slavery and what they were being taught about slavery. So if you are curious about how you would stack up to the knowledge of these 12th graders, or if you are curious about what maybe your bias is or what you thought you knew but you don't really know, or you were taught with a miscue of history, this is a great resource for you. Keep in mind, if you're taking this survey, that we are all lifelong learners. So no matter what you get, the score is not really that important. The important part is recognizing that we are all responsible for continuing our education and relearning of the truth and the real history of the stories that were either lied about or forgotten from our history. And then the last resource is an interactive infographic that I'm going to post for you to use. It has videos, links, and all kinds of things for you to help explore the scope of the problem of the whitewashing of American history. So those are the three resources provided for you for this episode of Little White Lies. Please hit that like or love button and share our page with your friends and family and get the word and the truth out there. Before we even jump into addressing the specific white lies that have been perpetuated, exceptionalized, or even just by omitting certain stories and narratives from our history books, we first have to look at and recognize the scope of the problem. The study I want to look at comes from an organization called Teaching Tolerance. And this is a project that is run by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And if you go to Teaching Tolerance's website, it is an amazing resource for educators. Educators can sign up for their services. It's completely free. They provide tons of resources, including lesson plans on how to teach about tough topics like slavery, diversity, inclusion, all kinds of things. And every time I mention something like a website, a book, or anything like that, I am always going to link it in the description of the episode. So if you want to check this out, or the survey I'm talking about, or even this infographic that you're seeing on your screen that I made for you, all of these links are going to be in the episode notes that you can just click on, and it will take you right to those sites so that you can have those resources. You can share those resources so that you can continue to share the truth with your friends and family. So in 2017, Teaching Tolerance decided to conduct a survey about what was being taught about slavery and then what students then knew about slavery. How they conducted this survey was that for the teacher part of the survey, they conducted a self-reporting survey. They sent the survey to not only members of their website, but also teachers who were not members of their website. However, of the 1,700 American social studies teachers who responded, about 90% of those teachers were members of the Teaching Tolerance website. Now, I think this number is really important because what that tells us about this data is that of these results, 90% of the teachers, we can assume, at least care about trying to teach about tolerance or trying to teach about diversity because they voluntarily sought out this website and are trying to find resources to be more inclusive. So I think that knowing that 90% of the teachers who responded to this survey are members of Teaching Tolerance tells us even more about the results. For the student part of the survey, Teaching Tolerance contracted with a national polling service. The national polling service that they used was Survey USA. It's highly accredited. It has a good reputation with their surveys for being honest, for doing them the right way. And that's important when you're trying to gather data and you're drawing and extrapolating results and information from this data. You want your sample size to be accurate and randomized and as valid as possible. So the sample size for the students were 1,000 American 12th graders, and they picked 12th graders or seniors because these are the students that have been in school the longest. So they have had the most exposure and potential to learn about slavery than any other student in the school system. Now, when we're looking at these results, I want to look at the teacher data first because, especially as an educator, I know that my choices in the classroom affect so much what the students take away from my class. So knowing what the teacher's choices are going to tell us something about what students are taking away from their classroom experience. So if we look at the teacher results, again, let's keep in mind that 90% of these teachers who are self-reporting these behaviors in their lessons are teachers who voluntarily signed up for a service that is about inclusion and diversity and tolerance. So most of the results that we're going to see are about at the halfway point. So about half of the teachers reported that they did the behaviors that were being asked of them. So one of the things that is really important when you're teaching American history is the foundation of the country in the founding documents like the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, even the Articles of Confederation, things like this. And when they surveyed teachers, only 52% of those teachers taught their students about slavery's legal roots in these nations' founding documents. So the rest of them just left it out. And when teaching about founding documents, they didn't teach the very documents that set up our country, the very documents that we still use today to guide our government, legalized, sanctioned, and encouraged slavery. This fact is not surprising when teachers are also reporting that only 53% of teachers emphasize and teach about slavery outside of the antebellum South. So what that means is that only 53% of those teachers are teaching about slavery in a unit in their classroom outside of the pre-Civil War time period. So they teach about slavery in this vacuum of time. In fact, only 54% of teachers continue teaching about the legacy of slavery all the way to how it affects us still in today's society. So when we look over to the student data about how they are processing and learning and remembering and absorbing all this information, those results become less shocking. Because if only about half of self reporting teachers who sign up for a service about teaching about tolerance, diversity, and inclusion find it important enough to intentionally include the truth in their curriculum, how can we expect students to know the truth? In fact, the history that they've learned has become so whitewashed and warped, only 8% of the students surveyed could even identify slavery as the cause of the Civil War. Not many more knew how slavery was protected by the nation's founding documents like the Constitution. And only 39% of students understood how slavery fundamentally shapes the beliefs of Americans about race and whiteness. While this survey is limited in its sample size, it is not limited in what it tells us about what we as individuals and we as a country knows about our true history. This is not an individual problem. This is not individual teachers making a choice to teach lies. This is not individual students choosing not to learn. This is a system and a culture that is dedicated to looking the other way and trying to make itself feel better about a history that we're ashamed of. But until we acknowledge our past, until we acknowledge the hurt, we can't move forward.